Hello and welcome to Scrappy ABM. This is your podcast with practical playbooks that will break the bank. This is your host, Mason Cosby, and today I'm joined by Jess, who is the newly minted Senior Global Marketing Director over at Supermetrics. Jess, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much. I'm super happy to be here and very excited to talk about some of our programs.
I'm super stoked. One, I am going to out you very briefly, but we're recording this the week you got back from mat leave, and you have so much energy for someone that is 5.5 months removed from having a kiddo. So first, congrats. Second, thank you for doing this interview.
Thank
And
you.
I'm very excited to dig into one of my favorite kinds of ABM programs, which would be customer expansion. So as we think about customer expansion, obviously your title is Global Marketing Director. When I think when a lot of people hear Global Marketing Director, they don't necessarily think about customer expansion. They primarily think about new business. So I'm curious, as you were building out your ABM program, why did you actually focus in on customer expansion?
Yeah, so I will give you a full background. I started at Supermetrics. So I've been at Supermetrics for just over 3.5 years now. When I started there, they hired me to be their North American head of marketing. So we were at that point really looking at how we could regionalize some of these programs. And that's, I came in to help them do just that. And then in my just career trajectory, some of the regional stuff went more into a global remit, and then I moved into global. So, what it essentially allowed me to do was step in and have a more like fine point view on how the different regions operate. And then when I moved into global, I took on the other two regions. We expanded out field marketing. We did customer marketing was under me, partner marketing was under me, demand was under me. So then we were really able to kind of say, okay, here were programs that we saw a lot of success with. How do we make them global? And then we were able to understand some of the regional differences and then start to play around with those. So it has been quite a journey from that perspective. But to answer your second question, Supermetrics is at its heart a PLG company. So we have a very land and expand motion. And that's the way we've always wanted to be. Zero friction for someone to get in there who can start doing anything that they want today with manipulating their data, right? Kind of understanding how that system works, different ways that you can manipulate your data. And then as they grow, they can kind of expand with it. So even though we do have very strong inbound motions, very strong outbound motions, that land and expand effort for us was always just a very powerful motion that wasn't getting a true kind of strategy of like, okay, what can we do? And at this point, we didn't have any very creative tech. We still had some data gaps in different areas. So it was like, what can we do to be kind of scrappy, which is how we ended up here, I would say.
Yeah. I love this so much because there are so many PLG companies that think that ABM isn't even remotely for them. But again, I look at customer expansion as like the best target account list of all time because
Yep.
you have so much data, you have so much context. You can predict a little bit of exactly what they need because you already know based on what they're currently doing where they're going to have future problems. So I just, if every client would let me, I'd start every ABM program on customer expansion because it's just so deeply impactful when done well. So I am curious though, as we think about the actual targeting, because a lot of people may start with all of their customers. And I'm curious
Mhm.
how you guys actually approached the targeting aspect of customer prioritization for your ABM program.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm going to back up for just 1 second because people who are, really invested into ABM, they probably have that flywheel kind of funnel, right? Which is you come in through your MQAs, you go down through your sales cycle, and then you move outside. And at the end, you get into this advocacy kind of portion. And I just often feel like it's almost forgotten about. It becomes this like, oh yeah, that happens, but here's how it can also drive in demand. So for people who are listening to this and they're saying, hey, ABM is, more of an outbound motion for us, I do want them to always kind of stick to that thought process that if you do start with a lot of your customer base and you do build programs like this, it is going to fuel your ABM function from from that inbound and outbound side. But the way that we started picking our accounts, the way that we started to really hone in on what this strategy was, myself, the VP of sales in North America, and the director of customer success in North America all got together. And we recognized that, okay, the gap that we have is customer education. So, where are these customers? How do we get some kind of personalized message to them? How do we help the sales team to understand where those targets are? And then from the customer success side, it was like, how do we get these acts of advocacy that are driving higher expansion deals, right? So customers that are already paying us, I would say 30 to 40K plus, that we're trying to expand. How do we keep them in our target accounts while we're also more in this like land grab base, which is I would say, the non-managed base that we have with the CSMs. And that's the account that's the approach that we took. So we actually started with an advocacy approach, which was saying, okay, we want to make sure that we get 10 customer case studies that are hitting on specific verticals, specific industries, specific use cases, which were really important for us. And we want to get that content pumped out. And that's going to help us to also with, actually with the inbound as well, but it's really going to help us to connect with those other customers, understand how they're successful, and then get into that base where we want to be. And then from there, we pulled out all of the customers that we were able to see product signals on. So just some, I guess, background on Supermetrics. Yes, you can use Supermetrics to kind of pull together all of your reporting data, but you can also use Supermetrics to connect into your data warehouses. So for people who are trying to use Google Sheets or Looker Studio as an acting data warehouse, that has a limitation. At some point, you're going to max your rows, your Looker Studio things are going to take forever to load. You're probably ready for that next step. How do we get the customer ready for that step? So that was one of them. And then just some of our more general product launches that we have and that we were really doing, like getting people into our actual platform, was a really big one that we had when we launched that platform. So, and please feel free to stop me while I mumble on here. But a lot of what we did is we took out these lists from product signals that we could see. We went back to the selling teams. So not just, now we went a layer down into management and actual sellers who these accounts were owned by. And we started having them cherry pick. Who are the ones that we feel in this are the right people? Who are the people that you've spoken to that are not ready? Like, let's not hound our customers. Like, this is about making their experience the most positive experience that we can have. It's about keeping them as customers. And once we had that, we started running pretty targeted, what we would call meet your manager campaigns. And that helped and we did it with Postal, now Sendoso, to help introduce people who maybe didn't have an account manager, get on those calls and kind of learn what the new evolution for them was at Supermetrics. And we were able to expand that, like that it became such a predictable channel for us. That's how we were able to expand it. I can go into some of that as well on some of
Yeah.
the metrics that we were able to see on it.
I mean, a couple of things I'm just going to call out. Of one, it sounds like you had an immediate segmentation of your customers of, do they have an account manager, and then are they already with an account manager and they've already actually started to expand some, where there's further expansion opportunities. And it sounds like the
Right.
two different motions were for those that already had, an account manager that were already in a deeper relationship, essentially turning them into core advocates and creating case
Hmm.
studies and testimonials. And then I'm sure as you dug into the case studies, you found other problems that they're like, oh,
Yeah.
we also saw that. So,
And other opportunities, which is
yeah.
crazy. So, two things happened with our case studies, which was very interesting. One, we learned different ways that people were using our product that we didn't really have in our use case library or in our knowledge sharing of what you could do. So it was very interesting, especially when we started blending between whether you were a true marketing persona or whether maybe you were business intelligence, whether you were a data analyst. And it was really interesting to see the way that people were using Supermetrics. The other thing that's really interesting is sometimes, the businesses themselves don't truly understand the value of your tool until you do an exercise like this with them. And
Mhm.
so when they came on to do our podcast, which we were able to make into tons of other, we were able to make that into a case study. We were able to repurpose that multiple times. They themselves were able to give ROI stats to us in live time that was not something that probably was it that they were looking at day to day. But
Yeah.
that also helped them realize, wow, we were, for agencies, wow, we were able to expand our client base like significantly because of Supermetrics. Or if you were in a brand, like we spoke to people who were in BI fields for massive companies who said, I'm able to track across the many retail motions that we have, what's happening with our data. So I just thought it was really cool for them also to kind of uncover their own success that they can then use internally for them as their own success message. So it was a very interesting approach to take that way. And it did. We saw not only on the expansion side, but we also saw incredible retention numbers with this
I
for
love
people
that.
who were parts of our acts of advocacy. So it really was moving across the board for us in terms of the success message that we wanted to see as a business.
Okay, so sorry, just this alone of when you go to develop case studies, you kind of force your customers politely to look at the actual success that they've had with you, and they're like, "Oh, this is amazing." You uncover new problems that you can also solve. You increase retention, and then I think the most important thing that we can hone in on is you develop assets that are then able to be repurposed for every aspect of the customer engagement, whether that be use cases that you didn't know of, or just again those success stories you can use in new business and in customer expansion efforts. So, like for
Yeah.
your existing base that was paying you that had account managers, sounds like that alone is a gigantic win that probably everyone can go and at least do some of today. So like takeaways like write down 10 customers you want to make a case study for and just see the long-term impact that comes out of actually the intentional effort to make 10 case studies.
Yeah. I
So
think that like if you're going to action something, it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be the biggest logo that you have. It doesn't I would make this a true customer project. I would make it this is you're going to be customer first. You're going to look at the people who are true champions of your product and the ones who are using your product the best, who are going to give other people ways that they're going to get into your product and what they're going to see, and the success metrics will tag on. So I absolutely think if you aren't doing that today, that's like a step one that you should be looking at.
love it. And then the other audience were those that didn't have account managers. You did a meet your manager program. You referenced direct mail. I'm curious, what other channels did you guys use to actually engage this base that didn't have a lot outside of the PLG motion happening?
So it's kind of interesting for folks who have a strong PLG motion. And I would argue that a lot of companies, if they did not start with that motion, they are absolutely trying to build it today. You do get into this, I would say, gray area of when does it make sense for a client to have a CSM and what does that mean for kind of your like operating costs and things like that. So this kind of gray area who were just left, right? They were like, okay, great, you're self-serving our product, you're using our product, you're not churning from our product, like all of those things are great, but who is really like supporting you? And how do we give you that support? And do you know that you have a manager you can go to? Can we give you an extra personal touch? So we did do a direct mail campaign. We did take those accounts and we did make more digital ad sets that we could push to LinkedIn. So if there was a single performance marketer, for instance, who was the champion of the tool, could we then do a more account-based approach to get more people in that organization familiar with Supermetrics and then start to bring them into the conversations? We did a very heavy sales pull. We also did pretty specific email nurtures. So where we were sharing information of multiple people we had on the account, not just the single contact that we had there, to just give people the education they needed to let them know what we were doing, what new products we're launching, how it could help them. So we were very specific in trying to personify, I would say, some of our messaging there, since our product can be very technical or very non-technical, and how do you make that messaging work for both of those audiences, right, based on the kind of tools that they might be looking at. So those were the main channels that I would say that we used to get together.
And I'm also curious, you've referenced a couple of things like making sure they actually knew about all the functionality that the product had. Channels are only as good as where you actually route people. So, what were the exact places you or content assets or points of engagement that you tried to point these audiences towards?
Yeah, that's great. So for us, getting new trials into either our platform or the different things that we were launching are always going to be really important for us because that's how you create stickiness. So it was easy for us to say, hey, we have a new connector, we have a new destination available. we would go back into some of the notes and see where were there misses or what were people looking for as customers in terms of things that they wanted, and then we would use that as an anchor to get them into the different areas that we wanted them. So if it was to trial something, we normally were trying to steer them there. If it was for them to see how other people were using Supermetrics, then I would say yes, we were going to use some of those content assets, whether it be the podcast itself for listening or the case study that we would push on the website. For some of the new product launches, we would just link them directly to a product page, and some of the blog articles maybe we had to support that. But I would say that because we were able to take a step back and say, what are the buckets that we have, and how does it make sense to communicate with each of these people so that we're getting them into the product and they are seeing success with the product. It was easier for us to say, here's the path that they need to be on, or here's the part of the journey they need to be on. Maybe they're not ready for a trial because they are not really a user of the product and they need a little bit of education before that. So we were able to make some of those like determining factors before we just like kind of mass blast things out, if that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. And you answered the next question, which is, just wanted to clarify if you were essentially from the start saying, hey, meet your manager. But it sounds like there was education, you saw engagement, and then you introduced the manager based on increasing levels of engagement.
Yeah, and I have some stats here, which is kind of interesting because once we started doing this Meet Your Manager campaign, which again, sometimes people don't open, your newsletters or they're not interacting with the ads that you're doing, right? And then all of a sudden they get this personalized email that's, from a person that's, hey, I'm your manager. I want to say hi. And it had a gift tied to it, right? And we very rarely did gift cards for this. So that's something that I want to call out because it's like people sometimes will throw those in. We usually tried to make it a little bit more personalized. So if it was someone that they were really trying to get in touch with, the team would then send something out. If it was someone that maybe it was spring, so we were sending like you could pick what kind of plant you want, or the holidays, people always want cookies and things like that. So we recognize that we did want this to feel personal and not like here's $25 to get on a call. But when we sent these out, I would say that we saw booked meeting rates upwards of like 13 to 14%. So that's like, after your open rates, your click through rates, everything like that. And again, it was a smaller subset. So this is I would say one to few kind of
Yeah.
model, right? That we were doing internally. But when we did it originally, when we were just like, hey, meet your manager, come to it, we were seeing, you know, like less than 1% in booked meeting rates. So we
Yeah.
recognized that once we could pull these audiences out, we could talk to them strategically about what their pain points were. And then we could have like a little bit of a gift incentive. We were able to predictably generate pipeline through each of these sends for, I would say, between 150 and 200K per send that we were doing. And we wouldn't like, this is
Wow.
something that we would do either, we would try and do monthly. So we weren't bombarding people. We weren't like sending the same person 12 messages. So we were being very strategic in how we were sending this out, but we were working very closely with the sales team on what messaging was going to resonate with them. Yeah.
So, first of all, you breezed past it, but you had a sub 1% booking rate that then increased to an average of 13 to 14% booking rate.
Yeah.
So that's like what is that? Like a
Massive.
1400% increase.
Yeah.
We think about like, oh, it's only 14. A 2 to 4% increase is like 100% growth. So like
Yeah.
that's from sub 1% to 13 to 4. That's crazy. First of all, and also like those are just good percentages. Like we're looking at outbound cold being like a 1 to 3% response rate if you're lucky.
Yeah. If
Um,
you're lucky
so
today.
that's yeah, that's amazing. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I want to clarify. Are you saying 150 to 200K in pipeline per month per send?
Percent.
Okay, so we're talking like from an ROI perspective to we'll just say pipeline value created. Like you're probably investing a couple $1,000s per send for the
Yep.
system to then get 150 to 200K.
Yeah.
So 20K in sends to
My
make a million in pipeline.
Yeah, it was, yeah, about. And I would say that our close rates that we were having on these were still really high. So I was still at the end of the day, spend and all, I was still seeing like a 9x on my spend that's there for ROI. And it was just really easy to replicate. It was really easy to say, here are the people that we're seeing, or here's a new product launch that,
Yeah.
has strong commercials that is going to like really help someone make do their job better, right? That's what
Hmm.
like we're here to do at Supermetrics. And like at every ABM team who's working really closely with their sales team, we were able to also craft really really great messaging. Like one of our sales reps said, you know what, I talked to two people this week who said if we could have a strategic review, it would really help me. And we changed our messaging to say like, hey, here's a gift, here's your strategic review.
Yeah.
And they booked for a strategic review, and like the pipeline that we turned into those was still really successful. So I think that yes, there's a lot of triggers and handles and levers and everything that marketing can pull to assist the sales team, but it's still they are the ones who really understand what is resonating, what is closing, where their time is best spent. And
Yeah.
if you can build that trust with that team, then these programs like this become very easy to scale.
Yeah. A couple of things I just want to call out. 9x, I want to make the assumption, is that on year one? Turn on year one spend?
Yeah, actually my spend was actually higher than that when I was using postal period within a lot of with my different programs, but I would say that my average with these programs was between 8 and 9x. So like
Again,
for
but
with
on
all these cents.
first year spend. So
Yeah,
if they stay
first
for a
year.
second year, like these get exponentially huge. Like this,
Mhm.
anyway, sorry, it's such a practical playbook that I think most PLG companies can run, which is like figure out what problem they're solving based on their persona, align that with the features and functions that they are not currently spending, run ads up against them, do a meet your manager send to like have them walk through the platform with the features that they're missing, and
Yep.
then upsell from there. And then once they're now hugely successful, build a case study out with them, outline the functionality gaps that they still have, even despite being hugely successful with your product, to increase retention and then expand them further. And then just do that every month.
Yeah. There's it's kind of funny like when you put it in like the terms like that, but it's really the company buy-in. So you got to get people to kind of believe the magic is going to happen, right? So
Yeah.
for instance, we had a relatively small agency who was spending around 10K with us, but they were just really big champions of the product, right? And so this was one of the ones that we doubled down on. And the account manager said, listen, I think that this is going to have a lot of opportunity because they're seeing how we are able to help them expand their service offerings as well as retain their current customers. And so it's massively helpful for them. Yes, we did these acts of advocacy with them. We invited them to different speaking things. We put that customer touch point in with them, but they also expanded to 140K within the 6 months, right? So this wasn't a 3-year sales cycle. Like we don't like when you're a PLG company, your ACV is a little bit smaller. You don't have that longevity, but it just goes to show you that you create that customer trust. You really start to push this out. You really start to build in and show what your roadmaps are, what your thinking is, why you are so customer first, and they don't want to leave to another company, right? Like that customer loyalty is so important, and I think that people often forget. Marketers know that it's cheaper to keep a customer than to acquire a new customer, but then sometimes it's like the current customers just get put on this back burner, and it's just such a powerful motion
Yeah.
if you can really just put some scalable programs behind it and not that much spend. I think total spend that I had in my gifting program for the year, and this is total, this is like including these campaigns and more, was like 35K. So we're not talking about that I had hundreds of thousands of dollars to burn. Do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Oh, no, trust me, I love it. All right, I got two final questions for you. One, as you look back on the specific program, is there anything that, as you built it out, didn't work that you had to pivot to actually make this into the repeatable motion that it is now?
So This is the part where I'm going to talk about the global aspect of it. So, what works in one region doesn't always work in another. And what we found is that gifting in general can be somewhat touchy in other
Hmm.
regions. I think the US can be much more of a hands on region. Yes, they are looking for calls with people. Yes, they are going to say, I don't send me books of documentation. I want to get on a call and talk to someone of how this is going to be successful. And then some other regions are much more hands off, right? What do you need my time for? Send me documentation and let me take a longer cycle on that. So I would say the first thing that I would have probably done differently is scaled it out with very specific regions rather than trying to do a massive global, because that's a
Yeah.
lot of times what we would do. We saw success in the US and then we would try and push to more global projects. And so that one I would say training, time and development, hearing and understanding reps in other regions who really know what's going on there. That's probably was something that I would have done differently to make the program scalable, successful faster, because we would have known what regions it would have worked in and how to do that
Yeah.
better. So that's probably what I would say and what I would caution anyone who is looking over a global landscape. I'm sure that people are already pretty aware of there is some sensitivities in different regions, and compliance is different and cultural is different. So probably that would be my number one thing that I would say, just be mindful of.
Yeah. Could not agree more on that front. Well, Jess, this has been awesome. Like to dig into some actual numbers and metrics and see actual impact on $35,000 worth of spend and how that has
Yeah.
created a 9x return on year one. That's amazing. So the last question I have is just if you were to rewind back to your first ABM program, what is one thing you wish you had known before you got started?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so this is gonna date me a while, but I was a pretty active power user with Sixth Sense, way back in the day. We're talking like 2018 at this point. And I I don't think at that point I was really as focused on the personified messaging. So
Yeah.
there was a lot of learning curves around where are you doing digital, how you're using other channels, right? It's not, this isn't, which I think a lot of people have got burned about in the past with ABM, which is, oh, we did display marketing with a platform, right? ABM is so much more of a corporate decision and motion. It's not a marketing motion. And so I look back at those days fondly, but with a lot of learning, that there was much, much more sales, I would say, input that was needed. There was much more corporate training that was needed and how we were going to make these motions work, and much more buy-in that was needed for these motions to work really well. So I think that we've come a really far way from when this was, ABM was just for marketers, and now it
Yep.
has become more of a corporate strategy to go to market. But yeah, it's so funny. You look back at those days and you say, wow, you learned a lot over the years though, huh?
Yeah, I just even look back on the past 3 years of building Scrappy, and I'm like, golly, some of the things I did three years ago, I now understand why I do them differently today. We'll just put it that
Mhm.
way. Like, it's not. I don't even have to go that far back from that perspective. So I love it. Well, Jess, again, this is a great episode. So like, thank you for actually like sharing details and going into very practical things that I think pretty much anyone can, even if you're not a PLG motion, like just go build some case studies with your best customers and recognize like, oh, you might stumble upon more revenue and increased retention as a result of it. So I love that. If people want to find out more about you, where would you point them?
Feel free to ping me on LinkedIn. Happy to talk more. I will leave everyone with, don't forget your CS team when it comes to expansion. They're a very powerful motion. And so sales, CS, and marketing all have to work very well together. And no, I'm super happy to come on here, Mason. Thank you for inviting me. And yeah, it's been great.
Awesome. Well, again, Jess, thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Scrappy ABM. We'll see everyone in the next one.